everybody. Welcome back. I am very excited today once again to join my friend Chris Chambers, former executive for WWE, now living the life of luxury and leisure. But I persuaded him to come back, at least to chat with me about some of the greatest times that ever happened in the WWE. And he has some tremendous stories. And I'm particularly excited about today because we are going to talk about earth-shattering changes with the WWE. If you are a history buff when it comes to World Wrestling Entertainment, you know that during the 90s, it was a major struggle. They were down tremendously to the WCW. We keep hearing over and over again about 83 weeks. Well, this was in the midst of all that. And Chris Chambers was one of the individuals who helped turn that all around forever. And this is going to be a great episode because we are going to be talking about the Attitude Era. And if you have ever wondered how all of this came about, you're going to get some real answers today, right down to that iconic logo, the scratch logo that is so synonymous with the WWE even today. Chris, great to see you once again, my pal.
Great to see you. It's an honor to be seen, especially with a Bexy Award winner like yourself. It's
yes, I know.
I know it's an honor and a privilege. And
I hope you caught my acceptance speech.
I did actually. I felt that. It came right across. It was very deep, very emotional. I almost shed a tear.
None of this stuff means anything next to that Bexy. You know.
Yeah, when are you getting the actual award, by the way?
Well, that is a good question, and we're reaching out now to the podcast universe. I hope that Becky is watching, and I'll, DM, and I'll get you the address, and we'll make sure we get that, and it'll be shown prominently on the set here, Chris.
Right.
But that is certainly a topic, but not at hand today. We'll discuss more of that in my tremendous achievements. But today, let's talk about the Attitude Era, and Chris.
Yeah.
What a journey you had. I mean, really. And at this point, folks, we're going to just start talking about some of these topics that really did change the WWE forever. And the Attitude Era was certainly a period of time that did that. So let's begin at the beginning.
I'll jump forward. Yeah, I'm going to jump forward into where the term attitude came from, how those spots came about, and then the logo. I'll set the stage for you. In the end of '96 is when things started to turn around a little bit. I had written and produced the Stone Cold vignettes leading into the Bret Hart match at MSG, and we'll talk about those another time. Mm-hmm. But the ball now was starting to roll. Okay, and then. It was
Vince had loosened the reins a bit. He'd given you more creative.
It did creatively. Now we had a little bit of an edge, and we weren't able to spend any money. And then now we have a little bit of Vince's trust, and we can do some other things. So early in '97, in February of '97, David Sahadi and I shot the Raw's War Open, which was that was our first big shoot. It was at a warehouse in Brooklyn. And that was that's another story for another time. And then, going forward from there, we got the Titantron and the stage and all that set up. And so, the screen was working. We told you that story last time about how that came about. So now everything's starting to come together. And along with that is, an amazing amount of work because now, get this great idea to have that screen. Well, guess what? You need content for it. Besides live content backstage, you need entrance videos, you need vignettes, you need whatever. And so we were working at a pace that was insane. So there was a time from the end of '96 all the way into like May of '97. I didn't even have one day off, not even a holiday, nothing. And I was fried. I was completely fried. And I got to the point where I didn't know if I could do it anymore. I mean, Sean, it was so nuts that when I would go to bed at night, I'd have a dream and there would be stock music from the stock music library playing in the background, and I would know what cut it was. Oh, that's number 4 from Monsters of Rock, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind.
And not even Jim Johnston music. Come on.
No,
wow.
no, Jim and I, the good part about this time is Jim and I had been working together a lot, and we worked together on Stone Cold's music, and we started doing other music down the road like DX and all that. We'll get into that too. And that was fun, but to your point, because of the Titantron, now everyone wanted a new entrance, everyone wanted new music, everyone wanted a new video, and man, it was just like I said, the grind was unbelievable, and I felt like I was having a breakdown, you know. So I went to Kevin and I said, Kev, I hate to tell you this, I know we're in the middle of it and we're starting to turn this around, but I got to take a break. I'm freaking fried. And he goes, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I can't sleep. Every moment is like wrestling. It's like ideas are popping, but I'm like fried. I'm exhausted. So he was like, if you need a break, you got to talk to Vince. Yeah. And I was like, what? And he goes, you got to tell Vince, because I'm not just going to, say you can
I'm
leave,
not telling him.
Like, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I sheepishly make an appointment to go see Vince, and I'm like, oh man, how is this going?
Tower?
Because at this point, Vince and I, we've had our ups and downs, and we were pretty good. And sorry for another time, I almost got fired for the Stone Cold vignettes. That's an interesting story.
Can't wait to hear that one.
That's a real good one too.
Yeah, I know.
But anyways, but over the, Vince ended up liking the Tron and all this stuff. So we had a pretty good relationship. So I went into the office and I said, Vince, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think I need to walk away for a while. He's like, what are you talking about? And I said, I'm burnt. I'm so fried. I can't shut my brain off. I can't rest. I feel like something bad's going to happen to me if I just don't stop for a little bit. And he goes, God damn it. And he starts telling me all this stuff like, when I go to sleep, I think of explosions and things are blowing up and the world's coming to an end and all this other stuff. And I'm like, what? And then he goes, it must have taken you some set of balls to come in here and tell me this. And I'm like, no, Vince, no, it really didn't. I'm not going to WCW. I don't have another job. I'm just fried. I just need a break. And he goes, all right. You take your break. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pay you while you're gone. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, but you got to promise me something. And I'm like, okay, what? If you come up with an idea, you got to come back and tell me about it. And I'm like, okay, sucker. I'm thinking to myself, sucker. I'm getting paid to take a vacation for as long as I'm there. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And he shook his hand and he said, good luck. I believe in you. I know that you still have a lot to offer. And I'm hoping that you come back and you come back happy, that kind of thing. He was really cordial and really cool. I like when I'm doing my Vince, it's a little over the top Vince. But
no, it isn't. Not really. And before you talk about where taking this break, you really should put into context for people who don't know that Vince McMahon that you knew behind the scenes of how difficult it was to work around with him, because he was somebody who was basically 24/7.
He worked harder than
for you to say that you had some kind of you couldn't keep up, or you had to have a break. Right from the beginning, everybody knew Vince. Nobody worked harder than Vince, and he worked his ass off through the steroid trial. And there was nothing that Vince would ask somebody to do that he wouldn't do himself. I remember, when Shawn and Bret had the Iron Man match. Vince went up in the rafters himself and did that ride down on the trolley thing that Shawn did. He did it first. He worked as hard or harder than anybody in the company. Now, that being said, he was one of those personalities where he probably slept 2 or 3 hours and he was fine. The rest of us actually, need some rest and to regroup.
So anyways, I go back to Kevin and I told him, I said, well, Vince said it's okay. I can leave. And he goes, what? And he goes, yeah, he said, matter of fact, he said he's going to pay me while I'm gone. And Kevin goes, God damn, he's a smart MFer. And I was like, what? And he goes, he knows you've got something else up your sleeve. He's just waiting for you to come back with it. I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. I didn't have anything. And so I worked for like another month to get them up to speed. So around June, I left, and that's, when I would go down south and play in that golf tournament in Virginia with Robbie. You were there with me a couple of times. So this is now summer of 97. So I literally just packed up my SUV and I drove to Florida, and I had no place to go. So Pat Patterson and Louis Dondero said, you can come down, hang out with us, play golf, whatever, which was really nice of them because, I mean, they're just, they were just really nice guys. And Louis was one of those guys. He was good, help you out. He was a good counselor kind of guy. And so it was helping me decompress a little bit. And so at a certain point, we were down there for a while. Watched Louis and I watched SummerSlam with The Rock's parents. They lived in a little townhouse at that time, just outside of Tampa.
Wait. You with Rocky and
Ada. Yeah, and we're in this little place, and they were so cordial to welcome. They don't know who I was. They welcomed me in. And Rock was on the roster, but he was just still kind of like getting his footing at that point, So we watched SummerSlam. That was the SummerSlam where Owen dropped Steve on his head. But, they were so nice. That's just an aside, but it's like, it's one of those things where the people that you meet in the wrestling business, there's so many nice people, and that story doesn't always get told, like how welcoming and nice and these folks, they were so nice. And then later I got to work with Ada down the road at WrestleMania 19 when Rock was a bigger star, and it was just nice to see her again. That was really good. However, so I digress. So anyways, I was still working things out, and a place that I always wanted to visit ever since I was a kid was Oregon. And I read an article about it in the Weekly Reader, and when I was in elementary school, and I was always like with the redwoods and the thing, I was like, I want to go there someday. So this vibe, this urge, I really wanted to go there, and then I realized one of our dear friends, Mike Golub, who I used to produce Pennant Chase on MLB Productions. It was a show Mike and I, in 84, 85, we produced that show together. And so we were friends, and Mike decided to go back to college and get his master's, and I went off, in a different direction, obviously. And so we kind of hooked back up, and Mike was working at Nike at the time, out in Portland. And so he said, come on out, Chambers, I take a break and, we'll hang out. It'll be a lot of fun. So I go to Nike, and it's, by the way, freaking awesome, man. Yeah. Now, keep in mind, campus. Again, this is we're on the campus, and this is at a time where our office in Stanford sucked. I mean, there's no way else to put it. I mean, there were times when we didn't have heat. There's times when the air conditioning worked so bad that in the summertime we were wearing winter coats because it was over. Yeah. There was a wrestling ring inside the building while you're trying to do edits. It was just, like I said, I've said a million times the same thing.
You should explain, though, that we're not talking the Tower. We're talking Hamilton Avenue.
Hamilton Avenue.
It's two different facilities.
It's not that building that people see on 95 when they're driving, down the pike there. It's not that building. It's a piece of crap building with a chain link fence.
Warehouse.
My God, it's so ugly and whatever. So anyways, I visited my buddy Mike at Nike, and it is like they've got ball fields, and there's a store, and there's like places to eat, and I'm just like, oh my God. And he's in charge of golf, and I love golf, and he's in charge of the golf thing and all that. And of course he's like, Chambers, I still can't believe you left baseball to go to wrestling. That's so stupid. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, Mike. Well, people, when I left baseball, those guys busted my balls all the time. You're selling out. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm selling out. I'm going to go, where somebody wants me. And I got something,
get paid.
Hopefully get paid, and hopefully I have something to offer. So anyways, so Mike says to me, he goes, look, I got a favor to ask you. And I'm like, all right, sure. You're kind enough to let me in your house and show me around Nike and all that. And what is it? And he goes, I have an intern. He's a really big wrestling fan. And I told him that you worked at WWF. And he asked if he could come over tonight and watch Monday Night Raw with us. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I don't care. It's West Coast, so, it was early out there anyways. But I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. That'd be great. So the kid comes over, and, we're watching, Raw, grilling. He had a little porch, we're grilling steaks and the whole thing. And Mike here he goes, we're friends. So you know how you rib each other. I rib you all the time about, all kinds of stuff. So he's still going on with, goddamn, James, I can't believe you do this wrestling shit. It's so fake. How could you do this? These guys aren't real athletes. You worked at baseball, it's like, why are you doing this? This is such a waste of, your time kind of thing. And I'm like, Mike, no, this is, just watch. It's really good. And at this time, it was a bigger event than it used to be. The Tron was functioning and all that kind of stuff. And he was like, when the show started, he was like, oh, wow, okay, there's more people there. And I thought, oh, it's kind of a big deal. And he starts watching the show, and he's like, and his buddy, his friend's there too. And he says, this is good stuff. And Mike goes, ooh, who's that guy? And I said, well, that's Ken Shamrock. He used to be the Ultimate Fighting Champion. And Mike, God damn, man, that guy looks legit. And I'm like, well, he's the UFC champion, bro. Of course he's legit. And then as the show went on, he's like, who's that guy? And I'm like, that's Rock. He's kind of new, but he played football at Miami. And matter of fact, they won the national championship. He's like, God damn, wow, who's this guy? I'm like, that's Ron Simmons. He's the only player to have his number retired at Florida State. And so it continued. Like, he kept asking me about all these different athletes. And then he started watching the show and is like, whoa, are those chairs fake? Like that kind of stuff. I'm like, no. And he started watching it differently, but he was still trying to, give me the rib a little bit. So as I was watching, the more we went on, the more I was like, it irritated me. And then with me, a lot of times if I get irritated, it means I'm mad at myself about something. And I wasn't sure what it was. So I went to bed and I started thinking about all those things, and I'm like, I was thinking Mike's got a bad attitude about this. And then I'm like, no, he doesn't. I have a bad attitude about it. Yeah. And I realized, I was like, and I started, doing some self-reflection. And I'm like, when I first started at the company, and you'll remember this when, the company was in Stamford and we'd go to Darien, to like the Black Goose or, and hang out at the bar. And it's, David and I, we used to bring some of the boy, Rock when he started, every we'd go there, we'd hang out or whatever. And there'd be girls, whatever. And when I first started, so now that's a few years in, but when I first started, somebody would, girl or guy, whatever, would ask, when I say guy, I mean, but they would ask, so where do you work? And I'd say, WWF. And they, oh, God, I used to watch that when I was a kid, but Hulk Hogan, steroids, all this. And they'd say all this stuff. And so after a while, I got a little bit embarrassed, right? To say where I work. So I don't like to lie. So what was, so as like by 90, I'm going to go back in time a little, by 94, 5, hey, somebody would ask me, where do you work? And I'd say, Titan Sports. Yeah. And they'd go,
the parent company.
Titans, which is not a lie. I worked for Titan Sports. I didn't want to lie. So I say, I work at Titan Sports, and they go, oh, is that like a sporting good company or something? Oh, yeah, we sell T-shirts and hats and things like that. Or if they said, oh, is that like a whatever company? I'd always, oh, yeah, we do some of that. Yeah, we do that as well. But I would just stay away from wrestling, right? Mm. So I went to bed and I was thinking about what Mike said, and then I started thinking about my own attitude, which was I wasn't even proud to tell people where I worked. I said Titan Sports. I wouldn't say WWF. And I woke up in the middle of the night and this whole thing popped into my head, and I was mad at myself because I needed to change my attitude. And I started thinking about this is a way to do it. And so I had this vision, and it was like the boys doing a promo and looking right into the camera, basically talking to Mike, but talking to me and talking to fans and saying, I know what you're thinking. I'm not a real athlete. I'm just a wrestler. Boof. That's the hook. And then go from there and kind of fill in with the conversation that I had with Mike. But the vibe of the piece, and this, of course, I couldn't say on television, was this is who I am. This is who I choose to be. I'm proud of who I am. If you don't like who I am, go fuck yourself. Okay? And that was the gist of the piece. But the point of that piece, it was for me, it was for the boys, but it was also for the fans. I wanted the fans to be proud to be a wrestling fan, to be a WWF fan, and I wanted the superstars to be proud as well. And that was the point of saying, I won a national championship in football, or I was the UFC champion, but this is what I choose to do. This is who I am. Yeah. And that's what...
Well, it's interesting, Chris, though, you mentioned with Mike, and I think what hit you is that he represented a large swath of what people thought of wrestling still at that point in time, that they still kind of saw these guys as that carnival, that old school, the big fat roly-poly guys. They'd see some muscly guy that just was yelling into the camera. And yet, and that had persisted even through all that. And the fact that, you had legitimate athletes, and that was the point.
That was the point.
Never do with that talent.
But what happened was anything that these poor guys would do was fake. They could fall off a building or whatever. Oh, it's fast, And it was so annoying. But the part of it was like I was mad at myself because I was guilty as well of not, standing up or sticking up. But a lot of, at that time though, there wasn't a lot you could say. First of all, we're behind the scenes, but the other thing is, what are you going to say to somebody? You can't, it was really challenging. So, but anyways, when I woke up that next morning, I was like, oh shit, I got to go back to work. I realized it. And in between, I forgot to tell this part. I don't know if it even matters, but I had to produce Kevin asked me to come back and produce a show because it was an emergency, a special. And he said to me, all right, Chris, I need to know if you're coming back or not, because I got a business to run. And if you're not, I need to find somebody else. And I said, I'm gone then. See you later. I did. I forgot to tell you that part. It was called the SummerSlam, the 1997 SummerSlam Spectacular. I went back for like a week, 10 days, put the whole thing together as fast as I could. And he asked me, I need to know now, staying or going. And I said, I'm not ready to give you the answer yet. And he goes, I'm sorry, I need to know. And that's when I said, no, then I'm gone.
Yeah.
And I left. And that's when I ended up going to Oregon. And so, he called me a couple weeks later after that conversation and said, look, I want you to think about this some more. And if you come back, I'll take some of this stuff off your plate, the management stuff, and just let you be creative. And that's what started the process in a way when Kevin said, I'll just let you be creative. Because what I was really getting away from, besides all the hours and the work we were doing, was I was also managing people, and it was just... The combination was overwhelming, to be honest with you. So anyways, I digress. I didn't mean to do that. So I realized, crap, Vince was right. I did come up with an idea, and it's a pretty freaking good idea. But how do I get this done? I don't know. How do I get this done? So at that time, Dave Sahadi and I had been we've worked on so many projects together, from the Stone Cold vignettes to the Raws Were Open to, I could go a million things. We we would riff and just come up with stuff out of the blue. Yeah. So I called David while I was still on the West Coast, and I said, dude, I got an idea, and I think it's pretty good. I got to run it by you and see what you think, and tell me if I'm crazy or not. And I ran through the whole script. I had the whole script in my head, and I even wanted, particularly, I needed Bret. Like there's several versions of the Attitude spots, but the original Attitude spot, I needed Bret in the beginning and the end, and I had Steve and some of the other, everybody in the middle who were big stars. And part of it was because I felt like I owed it to Bret a little bit, because I kind of buried him a little bit in the Stone Cold vignettes. Not, it was just, I was trying to change, how we communicate, and so that was a little. So I felt like I owed it to him, especially. I'm not a real athlete. I'm just a wrestler. And Bret, if you've been around him, he's a tremendous athlete. Always was and a great wrestler. Maybe the best, one of the best. Him and Shawn, I would say, were just unbelievable. But anyways, I ran it by David, and he was like, "Oh man, Chambers, this is great. I know what I want to do." He had the vision in his head, like he wanted. We were in this warehouse thing at this point. Everything we were shooting at, we did Stone Cold in a warehouse. We did that was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We did Raw's War was shot in Brooklyn in a different warehouse, and then David had found this warehouse in Reading, Connecticut, right where we were. It was an old wire factory, and he's like, I got the great location. I know how I want to shoot it. And I said, Dave, shoot it. I trust you. I just need the guys looking into the camera, because they need to be talking directly. This is not, back then Vince didn't want any of the boys ever looking into the camera. Yeah. Can't break that fourth wall. But I said, it has to, look into the camera. It has to be very personal. You have to feel like they're talking as a human being, not as a wrestler. Okay. So Dave was fully on board. So now I'm like, okay, I gotta sell Kevin on it. So David went into Kevin's office. I was on the phone and pitched the idea. Dave was there, and Kevin was like, well, yeah, well, come back. Let's see if we can get it done. We'll try to get it done. And so, I went back to Florida, got my SUV, and drove back to Connecticut. And then that process began, because that was something too. So, so I decided to go back and see if I could, actually get this done. And thankfully, Kevin was on board, and Kevin was really nervous about Vince. Again, here we go again. Yeah. And he says to me, whatever you do not send the script to Vince. And I'm like, well, why? He's got to see it at some point. He goes, you've got the word wrestler in there and real, and his head will explode. You can't do it. And so I forget what happened, but Kevin was out of the office, and Vince called, and he knew about this idea, and Kevin had sold him on the idea, but he hadn't seen the script. Okay. And so I'm like, oh crap, Vince calls, and so Vince is looking for you or Kevin. And I'm like, oh crap, Kevin's not here. So, hey pal, I heard about this stuff you're shooting with the boys. I'm looking forward to it. And at this point, Vince is happy I'm back. He knows that I've delivered some good stuff for him. So I'm hoping, I got a little bit of gravitas with him, maybe, right? Maybe it'll be okay. I need to see that script, pal. So I'm like, okay, here we go again. It's like I had to fax the script over. That's how long ago it was. There's a fax, and of course, he explodes. So he says, I'm not a real athlete. I'm just a wrestler. In the first line, boom. It's like, what the fuck? Here we go again. And thankfully, and when I tell the Stone Cold story, this story will even mean more, because trust me, that explosion was epic. This was just like a
Been there.
little, yeah, like a bunker buster. That one was like a nuclear weapon going off. But so he luckily later, he called Kevin, and Kevin said, "Look, let these guys. They have a vision. Let them do it." Blah 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 blah. So we, it was good. We went up to the warehouse and we got the shot done and the shoot done, and David directed the whole thing. I was just working with the talent. And at that time, I had a really good relationship with Steve because when he started, nobody understood his character. And at that point, I had already written the Stone Cold vignettes for him and shot them and changed his music. Jim and I had changed his entrance music with the glass break and the song. Yep. And so and then of course we worked together on the Raw's War Open and some other things. And so Steve was so when we brought Steve in, he was just like, you just tell me what you want to say.
He trusts you at this point.
Yeah. He's like, you guys are good. And same with Bret, because with Bret, I had, I'd done a sizzle reel for his agent, Barry Bloom. Back then, Bret was trying to do some stuff. He ended up doing Lonesome Dove and some of those other kind of shows. And he was looking for some other shows to do. And I did a sizzle reel for him, and he was really happy. So Bret was really easy to work with too. So I had, in my mind, and this was after Steve, had broken his neck basically in SummerSlam. So that was another thing. We were evolving.
Were they wary when you were selling them? I mean, of course, you got to get it past Vince, but. What was their reaction? I mean, like you say, Steve trusted you, and Bret had a lot of respect for you, but still, to have them say, "Okay, I'm going to have you look into a camera. You're going to say I'm a wrestler," and all this. What was their and the other guys too?
For Bret, it was fine because Bret got that. For the other guys, some of the other things, and so we were careful. Like Undertaker, I'm 6'10", 300 and whatever pounds. We were careful with some of them, especially the old school guys. Because Taker, what do you? I can't say I played basketball. You ruin his character. Yeah. So you had to be a little careful with who they were. So we were very conscious of who each one was. And Bret was happy to say wrestler. He always wanted to use that word. Right. He was proud to be a wrestler. And like I said, I owed it to him because of the pink tights, sunglasses, and sparklers. What a load of! I owed it to him for that. So I wanted to start and finish with him and, try lacing my boots. Now, like I said, there's different versions sometimes it ends with Steve. I had them all read different, and Dave too, different versions of the script. And as the initial ones went on, we ended up shooting more and adding more people in here and there and just matching the film because we were shooting on film. Back then, that was when we finally graduated from shooting everything on old Ikegami's 3/4 inch tape and VHSs. We actually had film to shoot on because we proved we could actually do stuff. So that was kind of a big deal. But anyways, David was so good at working with the cameras and understanding, the lighting and how to do the movements and all that. And I was mostly working with the script and with the talent and all that. And then I put the spots together when we got back. And, the script didn't change at all. But what was really interesting, when I got into the edit, the look of the film absolutely 100% matched the vibe of the script. It was gritty. It was honest. It felt like a movie, which was kind of what I was going for. And I knew I wanted it to be attitude because I was trying to change my own attitude. I wanted the boys to be proud too of what they do, when they go on a talk show or whatever. And I wanted fans to be, proud, have an attitude about it too. It's like, if you don't like wrestling, screw you. I'm a wrestling fan. I'm proud of it. Go screw yourself. That kind of thing. I wanted a wrestler to be proud to go to a baseball game or whatever, So I got into the edit and it kind of went together pretty smoothly, the first cuts. And like I said, we did different versions. So I got into the edit and it's like, you get to the tag page and it's, try lacing up my boots. boom, WWF Attitude comes across. Well, there's one giant freaking problem. This tag page comes up, and it's this big block blue and yellow logo, and it looks stupid. It doesn't match the vibe of the script. It doesn't match the vibe of the of the film, and it definitely doesn't have any attitude. You know what I mean? It just sucks.
It served its purpose.
Yes. So, but that was the logo. So I had no choice. I haven't presented this to Vince yet. Okay. So I had no choice. So I put it on there. And Dave and I were scheduled to, present to Vince. So before we went, though, I was talking to Dave. I even talked to Kevin about this. I'm like, man, I think this is pretty good. They all liked it. They were really happy with how it came out. I hadn't showed it to Vince yet. But I was like, man, this freaking logo, it doesn't work. Do you mind if I kind of come up with some other ideas for logos? And Kevin's like, I don't know, give it a shot. It can't hurt. What the hell? You've already pissed them off by just
right, I was
just
say
try
sacrilege. This is the
so anyways,
logo
So we show the vignette to Vince in his conference room. That conference room, there was a bunch of people in there. And the one over in the tower, not at the TV studio, not in the crappy TV studio, over at the tower. And Vince, he watches it, and usually he wants to watch things several times. But in this one, he watched it, and he was like, God damn, that's wrong with that. That's good shit. I like it. That's pretty fucking, he, excuse my language and all that, but he was all on board with it, Yeah. And I said, Vince,
just one time through, and he was like,
yes, which is extremely unusual. Like when I tell you even the Stone Cold story, that's another one too. But he usually is like, let me see that again, kind of thing. And he liked it. He got it, which I've said this before, is the one of the many things, Vince is like a love-hate guy. You can do both with him. And one of the things I admire about Vince is he'll have an opinion and he wants it his way. But if your way's better, he's cool with that, and he'll change his mind. And that's really remarkable, really. So anyways, we showed the thing, and he loved the spot. And I said, Vince, the one thing that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb is the logo. And he goes, yeah, it kind of doesn't go, does it? And I said, no, but I came up with some other logos. Can I show them to you? And he's like, yeah, let's see what you got. So we did the tag page several times, and we showed him a bunch of tag pages. He's like, wow, a bunch of logos. And he goes, God damn, those all suck. What the hell? And he goes, especially that one with the circle. I hate circles. And he goes to me, I want something that looks like somebody took a knife and scratched it into a prison wall. And I went, okay. So I went back to the TV studio, and I drew on a piece of paper what I thought would look like something written on a prison wall, and captured under a title cam. And I show you, I just literally just picked up a piece of paper, took this long too.
Really?
Yep. And I just drew it, and that was the logo. Okay. So we capture it under a title cam, and of course on the title cam it's black on white, but we have to flip the color so it's white on black. And I'm looking at it, and I'm going, ooh, that's terrible. It's so naked, and it's all it just doesn't look right. So I'm like, maybe we could add something to it. So back then, whenever I had lists of everything. When I'm doing a TV show where I had lists of everything. And the important thing, I would always put an underline on it. So I would just go, like that. And because my handwriting was so bad, it would have like a little curly thing on the bottom of it. Right. And so they grabbed that on the title cam and then put it on the bottom of the logo. And it was too monochromatic, so we changed the bottom to red. And the weird part about it is it's my handwriting, so it's a little bit crooked, right? But at least it's the idea, right? It's the idea. So I got the white and the red, and I'm like, maybe I'll find out if this is a good direction. We'll show it to Vince. So called Vince. I think it was even like the next day, and we were, like I said, we tweaked it a little bit in graphics. On paint boxes, just kind of like whatever. But it was basically what they captured under the title cam. So I'm thinking, I just want to go over and show it to Vince, and hopefully he'll say, that's the right direction, keep going. Okay, and that's what I was looking for. So he looks at it and goes, God damn it, great, that's the logo. And I'm like, Vince, this is just a rough draft. I can make this, I can polish this up a little. This is just, I have bad handwriting. It's like the original logo, if you look at the originals, they're kind of crooked because I don't have great handwriting. He goes, nope, that's what I want, that's the logo. And I'm like, okay. So we do the Attitude spot.
That was it? That's how it happened?
Yes! I swear to God. There wasn't a team of people. There was nobody. I got to get to this. There was nobody in marketing involved, nobody in sales. It was literally, that's how it happened. And back then, that's how almost everything happened. It was like if you had
up again. Hold that up again for me.
Well, it's not very good, but
I know. But look, folks, and then you got the belt behind you.
Okay, so they cleaned it up later, years after when I got fired down and I was in Florida, and they cleaned that up. And I got to tell you, I was so happy. I loved the new logo. I was like, at first, I was still there when we got the F out. That's another story. We'll tell that another time. That's a fun story too, because we had to go to WWE. But I loved when they changed it to that logo, and I love that logo now. And it started here, but that's so much better. So much better. I love that logo. So anyways, the only time, and the one thing you never do with a logo is you don't screw with it, right? Well, on the Attitude spot, I don't know who talked me into this. I'm still angry about it. It had WWF, then Attitude, and the Scar, as it became known to be called later, was underneath that. And I looked at it recently, and I'm like, oh, how did I let somebody talk me into that? Because it never looked right to me. But the original spots have that in it, and it still bugs me. And if you're a producer, you've never done anything that's perfect. There's always something that, God damn, I wish I could redo that or whatever. So anyway, now we've got the brand Attitude. The spots start airing. We start doing different versions of them. But it's still the same WWF Attitude. But here's the part that's so bad. So now we have a new logo. Well, guess what? Nobody told anybody in marketing, sales, whatever. The video games are all wrong. The action figures that are coming out at Christmas time. We've got international shows and it's like, oh my God, everything is wrong now. Every home videos are wrong. It was a disaster. It was like, and again, it was one of the things I admire about Vince. He makes a decision, he goes with it. He did not care. And when all this was brought up to him, he goes, we'll fix it, we'll get around to it. But it was like, oh my God, it created problems. Like the toy manufacturers were pissed. The video game manufacturers were pissed because now it was old. The thing that was just coming out for Christmas, now it's old, because it's not the latest version. And so I felt terrible. I really did feel bad about that. I got to be honest. But Vince, he was just like, I don't care. Yeah, this is the way we're going. Even some of the shows in the Bug, we had the old blue block logo, and we had the Scratch logo, as it became known. It became to be called the Scratch logo. And really, it was Vince who when he said scratch it into a prison wall, that's where the name came from. And he actually called it the scar, and what's ironic about I never thought about this before, but when we first did it, a lot of people criticized it and said, oh, they're trying to do anti-Nike. It's like the Nike swoosh upside down. That never occurred to me, okay? Yeah. But the irony is, it's literally how I underline things, but the irony is the whole idea came to me when I was visiting my friend at Nike.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that, it really wasn't. But that's where the idea did come from. The attitude part of him making fun of me for working in wrestling and not knowing exactly the right way to handle it. And so, that was, that's when I realized it was the right place for me to work. And believe me, I was really enjoying what I was doing. Like I said, the Stone Cold, the Titantron, all that stuff was great. But I wasn't sure if I could hang in there it was a hard road, man. We were all getting burned out. But once we did this and I was able to get that out of me, I was like, this is where I belong. I want to stay here. And then from there, I did a lot of other things after that. The Rock in the third person, that's another story. We'll come to that. Or DX and their entrance video. I did all that stuff. And, but a lot of it comes from, internal turmoil or things you experienced in life. And I realized there's no place in the world like working at WWF at that time, or even when I left, because I can't imagine working in a place where I got to work in every single department, everything. I worked in creating stuff out of nothing, working with talent, writing scripts, shooting stuff, editing stuff, music, writing music, home videos, network specials, whatever. And I realized there really wasn't any other place for me to be, and so I really, it was great. It was a great time and it was a great experience. And it's funny because whenever I do see that logo, I still think about the crappy scratch one. And when I see the original ones, like on some of the old flags and it's kind of crooked, I'm like, I had the worst hand.
But that was what it was supposed to be, imperfect.
Well, that's
also raw, and which it was. And
that's where Vince was right again. I did it, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you I was right. He was right. I just did it, but he was right. I thought it needed work. And he was like you said, at that time we were going in that direction where everything was a little bit, I think I've said before, even the TV shows Raw, it felt like they were out of control and, edgy and all that. They were very controlled. We knew exactly what we were doing, the whole time. And this is the same thing. This was a very thought out process. But the rawness of it was, you're right. Vince, he related and stuck with it. So
I think, and at the time, you mentioned when you needed that break. Well, you were also involved in management, which I know you all these decades. I know that was never a part of your plan. It just came with the ascension you had in the company, and they naturally want you to help run things. And once I think Kevin realized that at one point that, you certainly could do it, but it was tearing you down. It was taking away from what your real gift was, and that was being creative. I think that once that shackle was taken off of you and you didn't have to concentrate on that as much. And then also, I think you realizing that that's what you do. And you say that WWF, WWE was your place to be. Well, not just the subject matter, that it was professional wrestling, but also the fact that you had this place where you had that creative freedom. I mean, I know listening to your stories, and I knew David Sahadi as well. I was there when he was when he had first arrived there, and was there for a few years and saw the talent that he had. But the tandem of you two, and you weren't dealing with like an ad agency all the time. Like, but they
Oh
certainly,
no, we couldn't
but they
afford
were
one
not.
anyway.
They didn't enter your circle. Like your creative
Yeah.
was, as you will hear more and more of, a lot of the stuff that you guys came up with was by going to the Black Goose, which was a bar that was in the Stanford
Darien.
area,
Yeah.
and that's how it worked. That you had that freedom to do it. So I think that,
Yes.
when you did get to that point, I think a lot of it was that you could just do what you did. You could just be creative and focus on that.
100%. And if that's the kind of, I don't know how to explain this, but that's all I ever really wanted. I just wanted an opportunity to express myself and express stuff that's inside. And when we were cranking, by the time things were really getting going, like in 98, 99, 2000,
Mm-hmm.
this is embarrassing, but I didn't even know what my salary was. I was just so happy to go to work, and I wasn't, I didn't have a wife and kids or anything. I was just a single guy. But I just liked going to work because every day there was something new we were going to do, or something new that we didn't even know we were going to face. It was like, okay, here you go. Here's a new challenge. And it was exhilarating. It really was. And
What was when did you really see the reaction to those spots? Because as you just mentioned, that, okay, you put these out there, you're getting a reaction, but the company's already, because they're months and months and months, maybe even a year or so ahead with their marketing and what they're doing, and they're not even able to, they can't haul those logos back in. When did you start to really see the reaction to that new attitude?
it happened almost instantly because, like, even it started with the Tron on the belt. Once we did this and it had a name, you could see even people come into the events with their edgy signs, but even the boys were taking more pride. And I even met people. I just was talking to a friend of mine last week who said, "I didn't know that you did that." But he was 20 years younger than me. He was like, "I remember, like, I was a fan, and I used to be ashamed to tell people I was a fan because they'd make fun of me. And then I had a girlfriend, and I bought her a DX shirt, and I was so proud to give it to her." And I was just like, oh my God. So, like, it did happen very quickly. And the thing is, I think that's the thing with any good messaging. If it's honest and simple, everyone picks up on it. So everyone at the TV studio was, yeah, fuck you. This is what we do. The boys were like, they even got it edgier. They were like, yeah, fuck you. This is what I do. And they weren't afraid to go back and tell a story of their past if they were an athlete or worked at a different place, whatever. But the main thing to me was you could see that fans were taking pride, and you could start to see, once we switched that logo, holy moly, once we really did, the T-shirts and it just caught fire. So it was like, even though we went through a little bit of a phase there when we were going through the shift of the video games and the action figures and stuff. Once they had the new logos on them, whew, man, everything sold. So it wasn't, and the funny thing, again, just being honest, it wasn't done to sell stuff or to, it was just to say, be proud of who you are. If you, in the ring, be proud of where you work, and be proud to put your money down to buy a ticket. That was the whole vibe of it. That's all it really was meant to communicate. And we didn't say that, but it came across. And it seems like, that felt good, because I got to be honest, like, there's a lot of things done over the years, but I was really, this one didn't hit you over the head, but it kind of was like people got the message, and I'm very proud of that. I am.
Well, and Chris, it is really cool, because you can imagine when a major company decides or comes up with a logo. I mean, you can't even imagine probably the advertising teams and the guys pitching logos and all the designs and here you're just let's see.
Dude, we used
Scrolling
to
this
do that.
down and like, how does this look? And like, don't change it.
I drew the XFL logo on a bar napkin.
That's another story.
Yeah, it is another story.
We'll get to that. But you think about the guy, the guy that came up with the Nike swoop. I think he was a college student or an artist or whatever. They bought it for nothing. And I don't know. I don't think you got any royalties.
Nah, we didn't do that. Yeah, this is.
You should have.
I got nothing. I didn't even get a T-shirt. All right, I didn't get anything. But what I did get was the satisfaction of knowing that I get to do it, and there's a lot of pride that goes into knowing that. It's like I know I've said this probably before too. Is like I just want to always, wherever I worked or whatever I did, I wanted to make an impact. I didn't want to just show up and do a job. Yeah. And when you see something like that, like the logo, when it's everywhere, it's impactful. I know. I've never told anybody this whole story. Not even my wife knows the whole story.
Really?
Nope. Well, it's too long. It's very long and convoluted, it's awesome. There's probably stuff I'm leaving out, but that's the gist of it. And
but you think about it, Chris, it really did. The beginnings of this with the spot, and you thinking about that whole attitude, it changed the company. I mean, forever. From not just the way fans perceived it, and were looked at the product from that point on, but even the talent that they had within the company. It really did, and it allowed them to say, you know what, right, and we're going to have this attitude. It's kind of like, you don't like it, well, F you, right. And look what happened from that. Got the DX and everything else that came from there, and it really was. They were just looking in that camera and saying, you don't like it, then what are you doing here?
Right.
Like,
and that was the gist of it. And so, yeah, that's how it happened. And ever since then, you know what the funny part about it is? This part always cracks me up. So we just did these spots, threw the attitude on there and moved on. I never thought about it. All of a sudden, I don't know, 10, 15 years later, it's called the Attitude Era. I don't know who coined that phrase. I didn't. There's somebody out there because we didn't call it that. We just, we called it WWF Attitude. That was our attitude. But I didn't know when the era officially, begins and ends. Somebody out there, I guess, decided it. But, because after that came Ruthless Aggression, I guess. But it was funny to me because I never heard Attitude Era until years after we've moved on from it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I like that, but it wasn't me. I didn't come up with it. I don't know who said that first.
Well, they call the one before that the Golden Era, and then the Attitude Era, and what has gone on from there. And Chris, tremendous. I mean, a lot of that I'd never heard before. I've been around you an awful long time, and I know folks are going to really find it just incredible that's the way it happened, and it kind of capsulizes the whole thing of it was kind of like this grassroots thing. This just came, it wasn't this team of marketing. It was just right. And
no, there was a point. There was a point in the company. This is true, and when the point back when they were taking out the water coolers and all that. We didn't have a marketing department. They fired everybody. We literally had nobody in marketing. So we were doing all of our own stuff. It didn't even occur to anyone, call somebody in marketing. There was no such thing. And as we got bigger and this caught on, we ended up having a very large marketing department. But yeah, we didn't have any of that. It was, we were running pretty thin back then.
Awesome. All right, Chris. Well, tremendous. And folks, I hope you understand now. We're going to be bringing you a lot of these stories that behind the scenes that people have never heard before, and you're never going to know what's going to be coming. It's not necessarily going to be in chronological order. We're going to just decide on what sounds like it's going to be a great topic, and we're going to bring it to you. So, Chris Chambers, thank you once again.
Thank
And
you,
until
Sean.
next time on Backstories here on Primetime with Sean Mooney, we'll see you next time.